Our presentation is the California Climate Change and Local Sustainability Policy by Sophia, Teresa, JD, Leslie, and Deanna. As stated before, the policy title is the California Climate Change and Local Sustainability Policy. It provides a standardized education on the impacts of climate change and efforts towards resolution for students in California K-12 schools. Our target population is California students in grades K-12, but obviously this is a problem that affects everyone in the world. So here's a video from Bill Nye about the problems with climate change and why it's important.
We hear it so much that it feels like a buzzword, but it is far from it. Climate change is a real and serious issue. But isn't the climate always changing? What exactly is climate changing? Why should we care? Well, the Earth's climate has changed throughout history. Most of these slight changes are caused by small variations in the Earth's orbit. But climate change as we know it today is characterized by an abrupt increase in the Earth's temperature. It is estimated to have gotten 1.2 to 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit warmer in just the last century. 10 out of the last 13 years were the warmest on record. 97% of climate scientists agree that this new tendency is not caused by the variations of the Earth's orbit, but rather very likely caused by human activities. That means you and me. And since the Industrial Revolution, we have come a long way. Humans built airplanes, faster cars, developed remarkable technology, and learned how the natural resources around us can be used for our benefit. Although this has led to many wonderful inventions and advancements, like the device you're using to watch this video, or the ability to take a plane halfway around the world, it also means we've increased our consumption of natural resources and, in turn, released a lot of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Now, greenhouse gases occur naturally, but in excess can be dangerous to our planet. Modern human activities have increased the release of non-naturally occurring greenhouse gases because we have stepped up our demand for burning fossil fuels. The composition of greenhouse gases traps heat radiated from the sun. The more heat they trap, the warmer our planet gets. And as our planet gets warmer, we begin to feel the effects. One of climate change's biggest victims is our oceans. Oceans regulate the Earth's temperature and provide 50% of the Earth's oxygen. Now, climate change has increased the global temperature of the oceans by more than 0.3 degrees Fahrenheit since 1969. Although a warmer ocean might seem inviting to a beachgoer, it actually has devastating consequences for supporting life at sea. One of those consequences is ocean acidification, a direct effect of increased dissolved CO2. Since the late 18th century, ocean surface acidification has increased by 30%. A higher acid content means calcifying species, like oysters and clams, and shallow water corals, are at risk, putting the entire ocean food web at risk. This is bad news for the 1 billion people relying on the ocean as its primary source of protein. Climate change has also caused the sea level to rise. Just in the last century, sea levels have risen 6.7 inches, but the rate in the last decade has nearly doubled. Sea levels have risen because as the ocean gets warmer, it swells. On top of that, glaciers and ice sheets are melting. Antarctica lost 36 cubic miles of ice between 2002 and 2005, and since 1994, each year on average, the Earth has lost 400 billion tons from its glaciers. That's like an ice cube 7.5 kilometers on a side, 4 miles on a side, melting and flowing into the sea. When all that ice melts, it fills up our oceans, and just like filling up a bathtub, the shores can't hold all that water, and coastal regions get flooded. Troubling signs of climate change are increased extreme weather events. Natural disasters like floods, tornadoes, and deadly heat waves are more obvious to humans because of their immediate impact and their sharing of the images in the media. Climate change, as we know it today, is change in our Earth's overall temperature with massive and permanent ramifications. Although its consequences can be planet-threatening, scientists still believe there are things we can do on a personal level to help. Recycle and reuse things. Walk or use public transportation to get to work. Turn off your electronics when you're not using them. Eat less meat. While you're at it, eat more locally grown vegetables and foods. And last but not least, spread your knowledge and concerns about climate change with others. When it comes to climate change, the main takeaway is that it's real. And although we are part of the cause, we can also be part of the solution.
So just to reiterate and expand on some of the points, the main problems with climate change are that due to increase in industrial human activity, human-made emissions have caused the Earth to heat up 1.62 degrees Fahrenheit since the beginning of the 19th century. This affects extreme weather conditions, large influences in global food production, and risks to natural ecosystems worldwide. As a result, millions of people are having their lives affected by climate change, but really have no knowledge, or if they do have knowledge, it's misinformed. In the United States alone, only 69% of Americans actually believe that climate change is real and exists. When students leave high school, they're entering a society that does not recognize the reality of climate change. They have no sense of personal responsibility to combat this issue. They lack examples of environmental responsibility and sustainability, which reduces their chances for being conscious members of society. The California Climate Change and Local Sustainability Policy combats these issues and offers formal education and community involvement as the answer. The goals of our policy are to spread climate change awareness through standardized educational implementation of core information, to educate the students on environmental responsibility and sustainability, and to help address the problem of climate change. To offer unique experiences outside the classroom, to familiarize students with current climate change efforts, to encourage partnerships between schools and local green businesses, and to increase student exposure to local examples of environmental consciousness in order to help students reinforce and apply their knowledge of climate change into daily life. The components for our policy are, firstly, to provide funding to incorporate a standardized education of climate change and how to address it into already existing school courses. We have distinct curriculums for elementary, middle, and high school levels. We would offer grant incentives for schools who partner with local businesses that practice sustainable or zero-emission production for routine operational and supply costs. And last but not least, we would increase student exposure to climate change and climate change efforts outside the classroom by providing funding that allows students to interact with local businesses that utilize real-world solutions to better the environment. Education implementation at the elementary school level. Elementary schools would have field trips, and these field trips would be partnered with green businesses in order to provide experiences that double as exposure to environmentally responsible community businesses. Students would be given reusable water bottles and straws, as well as having access to filtered water, in order to reduce the amount of plastic waste used. The content standards that we would want elementary school students to have mastered by the end of their elementary school experience would be the ability to identify the basic factors and effects of climate change, and to be able to explore ways that green energy is being used currently at base level. At the middle school, our education implementation would include updated contemporary science textbooks and materials, with a large emphasis on earth science. Schools should focus more on earth science and make students aware of the environmental issues around us. They would also be required to complete science projects, such as an endangered and extinct species project. Students would research the significance of losing this species and what it does to the environment. By the end of middle school, students will be able to identify mitigation strategies and the impact and adaptation of climate change. And students will also work in groups in order to create a green city, or a city that runs on natural resources. At the high school level, modules will involve inventing ways to slow and stop climate change. Environmental and AP environmental science classes will also be offered to students. Students will be allowed to create and join environmental clubs, and they will be aware of the consequences and energy balances of climate change and be able to analyze CO2 effects as well as other data trends relating to climate change by the end of high school. Students will build their own model of a green home, including learned strategies from previous curriculum. And this green home will be similar to the Green City, but this will be on their own time without groups, as they should have learned enough to be able to invent their own ideas. Implementation of community involvement, local school and business partnerships. Schools have daily operational and supply needs that require them to partner with companies in order to have access to facility and classroom necessities. CCCLS rewards schools for actively searching and partnering with local businesses in order to practice sustainable or zero-emission productions. If they choose to partner with these businesses, the CCCLS will administer an annual grant incentive. To qualify, businesses must be vetted for proximity to school location, proven to utilize sustainable or zero-emission practices, and be willing to work with local schools and students to promote environmental consciousness. School and business partnerships examples can include local farms, office firms, transportation companies for school buses, and by including community to help educate students about climate change, lasting relationships are made between key interest groups and help to bring about greater local awareness. This idea was inspired by former Governor Jerry Brown's local control funding formula. Grant incentives are not intended to give money to schools in order to pay for additional services or supplies, but rather to incentivize schools to choose local, environmentally responsible businesses for their routine operation costs, and to reward those who decide to. The best way for students to connect the knowledge they acquire about climate change is to enforce it in real life. That's why CCCLS gives hands-on experiences through social networking with these farms and businesses. CCCLS utilizes green business partnerships to provide mutually beneficial volunteer and intern programs for students in middle school and high school. These schools will be offered at least one intern volunteer partnership with a local green business in order to receive the incentive funding grant. The implementation of community involvement. Local green businesses that partner with nearby schools can utilize students to help reduce the cost of labor, and the students get to gain experience and firsthand knowledge. This student intern and volunteer program would help to further facilitate local interest and knowledge of climate change and give students real-world experiences that they can take with them after high school. For the costs, our estimated costs for the curriculum implementation. The estimated cost for modules is $12,500 per month. To get this number, we took the average cost of an entire set of curriculum and then divided it by 9, as there's usually 9 months in a school year. To evaluate the policies, school districts will be responsible for the individual evaluation and implementation. Standardized testing will be issued to further assess and evaluate students' knowledge and retention of material, but we do realize that standardized testing does not work for every child, so we will not only focus on the results of this testing. Faculty and parental input will also be encouraged as part of the evaluation. And here's a list of our references.